How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Gimel, Daf 3 of Masechta Makos. Wow, Chevra, we're already like 10% of the way through the Masechta. No, is that? No, wait a second. 10%. Yeah, after today will be about 10% of the way through, a little bit less. Anyways, I think a little less. Anywho, today, we're gonna learn two Mishnayos. Some interesting stuff, in my opinion. All right, here we go. Chaver, are you excited? Are you happy to get back to Gemara-y kind of sugyas? Chelik was very interesting, but it was a lot, right? It's I don't know. I'm happy to be able to sink my teeth back into a Gemara. All right, here we go. We're going to start on that Beis Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Mishum Rabbi Akiva Amru v'chulei. So Rabbi Akiva had said that if you have Eidim Zomimim, right? So you have a group of witnesses who testify about some guy that he owes $200. Turns out that they're Eidim Zomim. Then they. What's the thing I'm thinking of? Then they I don't know, something the coop. They fly the coop, and they run away. And then they show up in another Bezdin, and they say, "Oh, by the way, we're Eidim Zomim, and we owe $200 to this guy." So Rabbi Akiva had said, "Ein mishalmin al pi atzman." They would not have to pay based on their own admittance. My time is Rabbi Akiva. Fact the Gemara, how come? Because of a knasu, the knas ein mishalmin al pi atzmo. Because Rabbi Akiva's opinion is that the whole Eidim Zomim thing is a fine, right? Keilu Geva and Nadav testify about Itamar that he owes 200 zuzes to Yishai, and then when and then they become Geva and Nadav become Eidim Zomim. So the fact that they now have to pay Itamar is a fine. And v'knas in mishalim al pi atzmo. And a fine, when you admit it, you don't have to pay it. When you admit it before the Bezdin requires you, if you come to Bezdin and say I did it, so then the fine would be waived. Rabba Teda, and says Rabba, and you should know it's true that Eidim Zomim is a fine. How come? Shari lo asu maise v'neragunu mishamim. Because what does Rashi say? Tiknazu shari hamidim benevish lo hargo adam v'lo nerag adam apir v'neragunu mishamim. Right, meaning the Eidim Zomim, right, Geva and Nadav never actually made Itamar pay anything, and yet they have to pay him. It's not like they're paying him back; that he never actually paid. Right, because right, they become Eidim Zomim, right? Kasher Zom v'lo kasher os. So Itamar never actually ended up paying the money, and yet we still require Geva and Nadav to pay the 200 zuzes to Itamar, right? Or if let's say they testify that Itamar was Mechal Shabbos, and they become Eidim Zomim. Well, Itamar never actually got skila, and yet they're getting skila. Therefore, it must be that the whole concept of this punishment of Asizim al-Kasher Zomim is a sort of fine. It's treated like a knas. Right? It's not mammon. It's not like actual money that is owed. It's a fine that is imposed upon them. Rav Nachman Teda Shari Mammon Biad Bailim Umishalman, says Rav Nachman, and you should know because it's not, as kind of I said a minute ago, it's not like Itamar lost 200 zuzes and they're paying him back. Itamar still has the 200 zuzes, and still Geva and Nadav need to pay Itamar 200 zuzes. My niu to losu maise hanu derabba. But one second, is Rav Nachman, fact the Gemara, is Rav Nachman basically saying the same thing as Rabba? Rabba is saying lo naisu maise, right? That right, according to Rabba, saying the Eidim Zomim never actually made their victim do anything, and yet they are punishment and they are punished. And here Rav Nachman is basically saying the victim still has the money, and yet they themselves have to pay. Isn't that essentially the same thing? Same of a chain. Rav Nachman Taka, yeah. So just say, and similarly, Rav Nachman says the same thing. Amar Yehuda, Omar Rab, Eidzoymim Mishalim Lefi Chalko. I was doing Chazara on this part of the daf at the Hare Benuchis, because Chevre, as of course, as the people in Babylon town would know, one of the exceptions, one of the things that tends to get me out of the house is if somebody calls me up and says, "Hey, I want to make a minyan at Har Menuchis. Can you come out for a few hours and say Tehillim?" So we got there. We were waiting for all the other people who were schlepped out to gather there in the parking lot. And so while we were waiting, I was doing Chazor. So Amar of Yehuda Amar Rab. So says Rav Yehuda Amar Rab, Eidzomim Mishalim Lefi Chelko. So in Eidzomim, it just pays his part, right? So if you have Geva becomes an Eidzomim, and we're talking about where Geva and Nadav testified that Itamar owes 200 zuzas to Yishai. So Geva just pays his 100. So we're talking about 200 zuzas. So Geza pays 100 zuzas. So my mishalim lefi chelko, what does this mean? If it simply means that Geva and Nadav were testifying about Itamar, that Itamar owes 200 zuzas to Yishai, and then Geva and Nadav become Edom Zomim. So if we're simply saying that Geva pays 100 and Nadav pays 100, well, Tanina, we already know that. We don't need Rav Yehuda Marav to tell me this. We know it already from a Mishnah on Daf Hey. Mishalshin b'mammon v'en mishalshin b'malchus. That when it comes to money, we divide it among the Edom Zomim. So therefore, if Geva and Nadav were testifying that Itamar owes 200 zuzas to Yishai, so if we're talking about 200 zuzas, so Geva pays 100 and Nadav pays 100. But that wouldn't be the case by Makos. If they were testifying that Itamar needs to get 40 Makos, 40 lashes, so then Geva and Nadav would each get 40 lashes. They wouldn't split that. Okay. So we already see from the Mishnah, we already know that the money is divided between them. Well, maybe it's talking about where Imanu Ayisem Makom Ploni was only leveled against Geva, not against Itamar. Those other people are not against Nadav. Nadav, there's no claims against Nadav. But other witnesses came and said that Geva was with us in a different place, right? So we're saying, okay, so just Geva needs to pay his share, his part. The Mishalim Pal Gadide, that we're saying Geva just needs to pay his $100, his part, his 100 zuzas. Are zuzas also bucks? You think in like Bavel they called zuzas bucks? But is that really true? Would Geva pay 100 zuzas in that case when only he was made an Ein Zomim? We're learning about Ein Zomim Mishalim Mammon Ad Sheizomu Shneim. That neither Geva nor Nadav will pay anything unless both of them become Edom Zomimin. So therefore, it's not talking about a scenario where only Geva was an Eid Zomim. Amar says Rav Ba'omer Eidus Sheker E'adti. So Rava suggests that it's talking about where, Geva simply admitted, you know what, I lied. I know I said that Itamar owes Yishai 200 zuzas. Geva says, you know what, I was lying. So we're saying that he has to pay 100 zuzas. But Kol Kamine, we can't he doesn't have the power to do that. Kevin Shigit Shuv Ein Chozer Umagid. We have a concept of Kevin Sheigid Shuv Eino Chozer Umagid, that once a person testifies something, he can't retract. We don't believe him to retract. So once Geva testified that Itamar owes 200 zuzas to Yishai, he has to stick with that testimony. He can't say, you know what, I was joking. He can't do that. So Ela Ba'omer He'adnu V'huzmu Bebezdin Ploni. Rather, it's talking about where Geva shows up at a different Bezdin and says that he was an Eid, right? That he and Nadav were Edom Zomim in a prior Bezdin, and now only Geva shows up and admits that he was an Eid Zomim, and we're saying, okay, so he's got to pay his 100 zuzis. But come on, who's that like Delok Rabbi Kiva? Well, then that would be unlike Rabbi Kiva. Dik Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Kiva had said that an Eid Zomim does not pay based on his own admittance, and therefore, if we're saying that Geva shows up in another court and says that he's an Eid Zomim, he wouldn't have to pay the 100 zuzis. Rather, it's talking about a scenario where Geva shows up at a different bezdin, and he says that in a different bezdin, right, in an earlier bezdin, me, Geva, myself, Geva, right, together with Nadav, we were Eidim Zomin. And I don't exactly understand how this process works. Maybe we'll find out more info. But we were made Eidim Zomin, and then once we were determined to be Eidim Zomin, the Bezdin then ruled that we must pay 200 zuzes to Itamar. So it's not just that we're Eidim Zomin anymore. Bezdin is required. Bezdin now made a verdict that we owe Itamar 200 zuzes. So it's no longer a case of Eidim Zomim, it's now a case of Bezdin ruled, whether it's a case of Eidim Zomim, whether it's simply a case that Bezdin ruled that, I don't know, that they stole money from, it could be any, if once Bezdin rules, no matter what the case is, whether it's an Eidim Zomim case, whether it's a loan, whether it's a theft, whatever it is, once Bezdin rules that somebody owes somebody else money, it's no longer a fine. It's no longer Eidim Zomin. It's no longer a fine. It's no longer nothing. Bezdin says you owe money, so now it's simply mammon that you have to pay. And therefore, if Geva shows up at another Bezdin and says that I was an Eid Zomim, and then Bezdin requires me now to pay, well then, okay, he's basically saying, okay, I owe Itamar 100 zuzes, and therefore he has to pay. I may have thought to say, I may have thought to say, well, since Geva can only talk for himself, he can't talk for Nadav, so therefore maybe him just admitting his part does not work. It would have to be together with Nadav. Kamash Malan, that admitting just his part would be relevant, and he would pay 100 zuzes. Okay, fine. Now, we get to our first Mishnah, our first new Mishnah of the day. I think it's Taka. It must be the second Mishnah of Masechta Makos. Okay, this is an interesting scenario. Me'idin anu es ish ploni shegeresh es ishto v'lonosan laksubasa. You hear this? Geva and Nadav testify about Itamar that he divorced his wife, Sarah, Itamar divorced his wife, and he never paid her ksuba. Now this is an interesting case. So let's say her ksuba is 200 zuzes. Okay. Let's say her ksuba is 200 zuzes. Now they become Eidim Zomim. Right? Geva and Nadav become Eidim Zomim. So now what happens? Are you going to suggest, well, okay, they should have to pay him 200 zuzes because they were going to make him pay 200 zuzes, so they have to pay him 200 zuzes. Here's the thing about ksubas, though. We can't tell the future. How do we know that he wasn't actually going? Maybe in a week from now, maybe in a month from now, they are going to get divorced. In which case, he's going to end up having to pay his wife that money anyway. So, technically, they might not actually be making him pay any money that he wasn't anyways going to be paying. We don't know. It depends what happens in the future. If they never end up getting divorced and then, his wife eventually dies, okay, fine. So he never would have had to pay her ksuba, and yeah, sure. In fact, they were making him pay money they wouldn't have had to pay. But maybe he's going to die before her. Maybe they'll get divorced, in which case he would have to pay her ksuba anyways. So sure, they were liars, but it's just money that he was going to have to pay anyways. So it's an interesting scenario. So what do we do? Right? I'm reading again. Geva and Nadav testify about Itamar, that Itamar divorced his wife, Sarah, and Geva and Nadav allege that Itamar did not pay Sarah her ksuba, and therefore Itamar must pay her ksuba. That Itamar must pay her ksuba, and it turns out that they are Eidim Zomimim. So now, the tricky thing is, so the thing is, whether today or whether at some point in the future, he may well end up paying her ksuba anyways, in which case they technically aren't making him pay. They weren't trying to make him pay any money that he wasn't going to be paying anyways. So Omdin kama adam rotze liten b'chsubaso shozo shemnis almano nizgasha v'meisa yirashena baila. What we do is the value we calculate how much they must pay how much Geva and Nadav must pay Itamar by doing this. And the Gemara is going to talk about, get into more details. Let's just say one thing that we go out and we say we go to Yishai and we say, hey Yishai, are you interested in buying Sarah's ksuba? And what that means is that it's a bit of a gamble. The ksuba is worth 200 zuzes. Now it's a bit of a gamble because look, if why is it a gamble? It's a gamble because if Sarah dies, then you get nothing. Sarah died, so then Itamar doesn't have to pay anything. His wife is dead. He doesn't have to pay anything. So there's a chance, Yishai, that you might not collect anything. But if Itamar dies, or if they get divorced, then you will collect. It's 200 zuzes. So we say, Yishai, how much would you be willing to pay in cash right now? Right? And potentially in the future you could make 200 zuzes. Potentially in the future you can make nothing. It's a gamble. So they go out and they ask, they find out what would somebody be willing to pay for this sort of gamble, and then based on that is what Geva and Nadav would have to pay Itamar. Now, frek the Gemara, Ketzad Shaman, how do we evaluate this value of the ksuba? Rav Chizda bebal, Rav Nosson bar Shai Omer beisha, Omer Papa beisha. Okay. So basically there's like two ways that we can look at it. Basically we could, apparently from the perspective of the Baal, because the Baal right now kind of has more of the chazakah. He has the money right now. Basically if we evaluate it from his perspective, it would come out to a more expensive value. Yeah. If you evaluate it based on, he is like the chazaka right now with all like the property and the money and the stuff like that, and therefore apparently if you do it based on his chazaka it would be more money, but based on her chazaka, right, based on her thing about if she if he dies or they get divorced, so apparently that would not be as high of a value. I guess like the value that he currently has in the ksuba, I guess because he can eat for the fruits from the fields that are meshubah to the ksuba, and also he has the money right now. Apparently, the value of that ksuba is more valuable for him than her, so therefore it would be like a different value. So now, so you do it based on the value of the husband in the ksuba. Rav Nosson bar Shai Omer beisha, based on the value of the woman, and this basically means that you, kind of like I explained earlier, that you would evaluate how much a person would be willing to gamble, and that's kind of the value of the ksuba from her perspective. And then what they were making him lose was kind of the difference in that value and the value of the ksuba, right? So like if Yishai says, I'm willing to pay 75 zuzes for that gamble, so then so basically what Nadav and Geva would pay would be the value of the ksuba minus the amount that she would be able to get, for minus her value in it, which would be 75 zuzes, and the rest is what would be paid to Itamar. So that's Reb Nosson bar Shai Omer beisha, Omer Papa beisha v'chsuba. So Papa says that what we subtract 75 only from the value of the ksuba, right? Because there's the ksuba, but there's also you're making the husband lose out on nichsei melog, and right, because if she dies, he inherits the nichsei melog. By making him pay the ksuba now, he's also losing on the nichsei melog. So according to Reb Nosson bar Yoshaya, you'd basically take the value of the ksuba plus the nichsei melog and subtract from that 75 zuzes, if that's what Yishai is willing to pay for it. Now Rav Papa says, no, we only take into account the ksuba itself, which would be 200 zuzes, let's say, and then subtract 75 from just that. Okay, that's the machlokas. Exciting times. Says the Mishnah. Midun anubish ploni shu chayv lachaveru 1000 zuz, amnas litnon lo mikan vad 30 yom, v'om mikan vad 10 shonim. Om kama adam rotza litem v'yu biyado 1000 zuz bein nosum mikan vad lamed yom bein nosum mikan vad 10 shonim. This is also another interesting scenario. I wonder if I should roll up my sleeves. I'm going to think about if I should roll up my sleeves while I'm rolling up my sleeves. Okay. Yeah, sure. This seems pretty good. I guess I should roll up my right sleeve. And while I confirm that I want to roll up my right sleeve, I'll also roll up my left sleeve, and now I'm done. Now the scenario... Oh, one second. Now the scenario in this Mishnah is that Geva and Nadav testify about Itamar, that he owes Yishai, 1,000 zuzes, we said, right? I think, right? 1,000 zuzes. Okay. And Itamar agrees, yeah, I do owe Yishai 1,000 zuzes. But however, what Geva and Nadav testify is that Itamar, right, that this loan is due in 30 days from now. That in 30 days Itamar needs to pay Yishai 1,000 zuzes. Now, Itamar says, no. I agree that I owe Yishai 1,000 zuzes, but that loan is due in 10 years from now. And it turns out that Geva and Nadav are Edim Zommen. So the thing is, in terms of the zuz amount, all agreed that Itamar had to pay Yishai 1,000 zuzes. So that was not the issue. The issue was the amount of time. They were lying about the amount of time. And so they were lying about the amount of time. They became Edim Zommen vis-a-vis the time. Meaning, based on their testimony, he was going to lose essentially 10 years of time that he would have otherwise had to pay it back. So the question is, what is the value of that time, right? What is the value, right? Right. If you offer a person, I'll give you 1,000 zuzes loan that needs to be repaid in 30 days versus you have 10 years to pay it back. What is the value of that extra time that Geva and Nadav were going to make Itamar lose? And that is what they have to pay Itamar. So again, says the Mishnah, Midin anu bish ploni. Ooh, wow, my throat is getting dry. That's nice. Midin anu bish ploni shu chayv lachaver 1000 zuz. Geva and Nadav testify about Itamar that he owes Yishai 1,000 zuz. Amanas litnan lo mikan vad 30 yom, and they testify that Itamar needs to pay Yishai within the next 30 by the end of 30 days. Vihu Omer, Itamar says, no, I admit that I owe Yishai 1,000 zuzes, but mikan vad 10 shonim, I have 10 years to pay back this loan. And it turns out that Geva and Nadav are Edim Zommen. So Omdim, we evaluate Kama Adam wrote Salitein. How much would a person be willing to pay v'yu biyado 1000 zuz, and he can hold on to his 1,000 zuzes beinosnon mikan vad lamen yom beinosnon mikan vad 10 shonim, right, between whether he only has 30 days to pay it back or whether he has 10 years to pay it back. What is the value of that extension? And it's that value that Geva and Nadav were robbing from, right, we're going to make Itamar lose, and that value is what they have to pay Itamar. Says the Gemara, Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Hamal. I should really drink something. 1 second. Okay, where am I? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Hamalves Chaver le'eser shonim shvius mishamatzo. Interesting. So if a person, if Geva lends Itamar $1,000, right, 1,000 zuzes, and it's a 10-year loan. Itamar needs to pay back Geva 1,000 zuzes in 10 years' time. Shvius mishamatzu. The interesting thing is what happens on year 7. Let's assume that the loan was on year 1 of the Shemitah cycle. What happens on year 7? Shemitah. The Shemitah's ksafin. That at the end of Shemitah, all loans are canceled. So says Rav Yehuda Mashmuel, there is no such thing as a 10-year loan, because comes year 7, comes Shemitah, cancels the loan. Havagav the hashta lo korin be lo yigos, right? By Shemitah it says, by Shemitah's ksafim it says that loans are waived because of lo yigos, that you can't enforce a loan on Shemitah. And even though right now in year 7 the loan isn't going to be enforced, but in another 3 years, at year 10, it is going to be enforced. So v'afagav the hashta lo karin be lo yigos. Even though right now in year 7, you're not trying to enforce the loan, but sofasi lide lo yigos. But ultimately, at year 10, when the loan is up, you are going to enforce the loan and say it needs to be paid back, and therefore it would be in violation of the halach of Shemitah's ksafim, and the loan will be canceled at year 7. Masiv Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana asks a kasha. What about our Mishnah, which talks about a 10-year loan? Omdim kam adam rotze litein v'yu elev zuz biyado bein litein mikan vad lamriom vein litein mikan vad eser shonim. Our Mishnah talks about a 10-year loan and doesn't seem to have any issue with the 10-year loan. Right? The Mishnah is saying, look, everyone agrees 1,000 zuzes. Everybody agrees that Itamar owes Yishai 1,000 zuzes. It was just a question of time. That was it. And we got to evaluate the value of time. But v'i omar shvius mishamatzo. But if you say that at year 7 the loan would be canceled because of shvius, well then actually, if Itamar is claiming that he has that was a 10-year loan, essentially what he's saying is he doesn't actually have to pay it back, because at year 7 it's going to be canceled. And Geva and Nadav are saying it's a 30-day loan, i.e. you actually have to pay the 1,000 zuzes. So if that's the case, they should have to pay not just the value of the extension, but the entire 1,000 zuzes, because Itamar was saying it's a 10-year loan, which means essentially I don't actually have to pay anything. I have to pay 0 zuzes. And they're saying, no, you have to pay 1,000 zuzes in 30 days from now. So they're making him pay 1,000 zuzes, and he's saying, I don't have to pay anything. So if they're Edom Zobin, they should have to pay the full 1,000, not just the value of the extension. You hear? So kulu, right? So v'yomet shvius mishamatzo kulu nami bo yishalu melei. Geva and Nadav should have to pay Itamar all 1,000 zuzes. Amarav achab ma'iskinam b'malve ala mashkon uv'mos shtos of lebezdin. Well, says Rav, not necessarily. We could still agree with Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel that the 10-year loan would be canceled at Shemitah, and our Mishnah is talking about where there was a collateral on the loan. Because there was a collateral on the loan, there wouldn't be Shemitah's ksafim. Alternatively, there was a prusbul, right? Most shtos of bezin, there was a prusbul, and a prusbul essentially allows Yishai to be able to collect. Oh no, to allow? Wait, what? I don't even know whose names we're talking about anymore. But essentially, the prusbul would allow the loan to be collected. The Tanan is in the Mishnah Amalva al Mashkon, somebody who lends with a collateral, Moshe of the Bezdin, or somebody who makes a prusbul, ein mashmitin. So then there would be no shmitas kilu. The loan would still be collectible after Shemitah. Ikadam, those say Amar Rav Amar Shmuel Hamav Chaver Leser Shadim Ein Shvius Mishamatzo. Now there are those who say that Rav Amar Shmuel says fakir, that a 10-year loan is valid and can be collected at the end of 10 years. Shemitah does not cancel it. And even though at the end of the 10 years you will enforce the loan, comes Shemitah though, there isn't law, right? There's no enforcement at Shemitah, so it's only 3 years later, and therefore it's valid and it can be collected at the end of 10 years. Amr of Kahana, and Rav Kahana comes to say, and I could bring a support, I could bring a proof from our Mishnah. Omdin kama odem rotze litein view elev zuz biyado ben litein mikan vad lamriom ben litein mikan vad eser shonim. That punkt, our Mishnah says that we're just trying to evaluate the value of 30 days versus 10 years, but they don't don't have to pay the actual 1,000 zuzes. And if you say that Shvius cancels the loan, Kulunami Bo Shalume, the Edim Zomer should have to pay the whole 1,000 zuzes, not just the value of the extension, and therefore it must be that our Mishnah is a proof that that Shemitah does not cancel a 10-year loan. The Bezdin, whereas but Rava says not necessarily. Could say that our Mishnah is talking about that there's a 10-year loan is valid only because there was a collateral on the loan or because there was a prosbol that somebody who lends with a collateral or makes a prosbol, then the loan would not be cancelled during Shemitah. Okay. V'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. So Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Omer lachavero al menas shelo tishmeteni shvius mishametes. So it says Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel that if Geva lends 1,000 zuzes to Itamar and says, I'm lending you these 1,000 zuzes under the condition that Shemitah will not cancel the loan. Shvius mishametes, Shvius nonetheless does cancel the loan. So it sounds like what Shmuel is holding is saying is right. So lema kasover Shmuel masna mashkos b'Torah hu v'chal masna mashkos b'Torah tno bato. So let's say that this sounds like, right, so Geva lends 1,000 zuzes to Itamar and says, I'm only lending it to you under the condition that Shemitah will not cancel the loan. Shmuel holds the loan is valid and Shemitah does cancel it. Because Geva has no right to make stipulations and conditions about mitzvahs. If there's Shemitah's ksofim, so then Geva has no right to say, I'm only lending you under the condition that there won't be Shemitah's ksofim. He can't do that. So the loan stands, the condition doesn't. The condition's irrelevant. But one second, does Shmuel really hold Masna Mashakasav Torah to know batul? But I'll show you the opposite. Va'itmar, it stated, Homer lechavero, Amenashe ein lecha olai onoya. If Geva sells something to Itamar and overcharges Itamar for it by a shlish, right? What was it? A shlish, right? I think Onoya is a shlish. No, a sixth. And so basically, if Geva, let's say, is selling something to Itamar and overcharging Itamar, and it's a violation of Ona'ah, and Geva says, I'm only selling it to you under the condition that you're not going to claim Ona'ah against me. So Rav Amar Yesh Lo Olav Ona'ah. Rav says, Itamar can still make a claim against Geva of Ona'ah. Ushmuel Amar Ein Lo Olav Ona'ah, where Shmuel says, no, Itamar cannot claim Ona'ah from Geva because that was the condition. So that sounds like, so Rav is saying that Itamar can claim Ona'ah. Shmuel is saying Itamar cannot claim Ona'ah. It sounds like Rav is saying Masna Mashakasu Batorah to know batul. Therefore the condition is bogus and Itamar can claim Ona'ah. And Shmuel says, sounds like he's saying Masna Mashakasu Batorah to know Kayam, and it's a valid Tanai, and therefore Itamar cannot claim the Ona'ah from Geva. So we say, you know what? Taka, you're right. Shmuel's opinion is Masna Mashakasu Batorah to know Kayam. Hayit Marlo, it stated Amr of Anon Ledidim Farshali Mine de Shmuel, that it was explained to me, Shmuel's opinion, that Almanas she'ein licha olai ona'ah ein lo olav ona'ah. That if what Geva says to Itamar is, I'm overcharging you, and I'm selling it to you under the condition that you will not claim the ona'ah from me. I recognize that there's ona'ah, but I'm selling you under the condition that you're not going to make any claims against me. Okay, ein lo alav ono. Okay, so okay, Itamar can't. Okay, that was the condition. He cannot claim it from Geva because Masna Masha goes up to know Kayim. Menashe ein bo ono, areyesh bo ono. But if what Geva says to Itamar is, I'm selling you this item, and it's a fair price, I'm not overcharging you for it. Well, in that case, that's just a lie. He is overcharging for it. He's claiming that it's not ono, but it is ono. It's one hand to recognize that there's ono and saying it's under the condition that you're not going to claim it for me. Okay, Shmuel says that's okay. I mean, right? It's not a violation of any halachos. But to claim that there is no ono here, no, that's just a lie. And then Itamar in that case would be able to claim it from Geva. And therefore, Hachanami will apply the same thing here by Shemitah. Right? For Shmuel's opinion. Hachanami amanashelo tishmeteni bashvias, ain't shvias mishamatzo. That says, Shmuel, that if what Geva says to Itamar is that I'm lending you money under the condition that when Shemitah comes, even though there's Shemitah's ksafim, I'm only doing it under the condition that we agree that it won't be cancelled. Well then, okay, beseder, zmasna mashakos b'tor to no kaim. Mashakos b'tor to no kaim. Amnasha lo tishmeteni shvius mishamatzo. But if he's saying is that I'm only lending it to you under the condition that there's no shmitas kisafim bichlal, okay, that's just bogus. There is a concept of shmitas kisafim, and that would be invalid. Okay. But Shmuel, but Be'etzim Rav holds masna mashakos b'tor to no bottle, and Shmuel says masna mashakos b'tor to no kaim. Tana malves chavero stam. We learn in a brisa that if somebody lends his friend money and he doesn't give a payment date, a date for the loan to be paid back, well, by default it's 30 days. Right? If Geva lends 1,000 zuzas to Itamar and he doesn't give a date, so Itamar needs to pay back. So Geva cannot come after Itamar for at least 30 days. So Rabbi Bar Bachana came to Rav Lemeimar, and Rabbi Bar Bachana was in front of Rav, and he thought to say, Hanemile b'milve b'shtar, that this would only be if there was a documented loan. That a person is not going to go through the effort of writing a shtar for less than 30 days. But an verbal loan without a document could be collected less than 30 days later. But Rav says to Rabbi Bachana, Chabibi, this is what my uncle Reb Chia said, whether it is documented or not, we're still talking about 30 days. We also learn a price like this. Somebody who lends his friend money without a date, the loaner cannot request payback for at least 30 days, whether there is a document or not. Omerle Shmuel Rav Masna says Shmuel to Rav Masna, lo tesiv akarich. Rav Masna, do not sit down ad mafashas lo shmaita until you explain the following. Minoha milsa Dam Rabbanon, from where do we have this concept that the rabbis say, Hamav chaver stam in a rashul tov pachs min yom, that somebody who lends money to his friend, it's at least a 30-day, it's by default a 30-day loan, regardless of whether or not there is a document. Omerlei Rav Masna responds because the pasuk says Karva shnasa sheva shnasa shmita, that the pasuk says, right, was saying, right, that if the shmita is getting close, you still have to loan money, even though the shmita is ksafim, whatever. So the pasuk says Karva shnasa sheva shnasa shmita, that the 7th year is coming, the year of shmita. Once it says that the 7th year is coming, don't we know what's the 7th year? Shemitah. So why do we have to say Shnas HaShemitah? We already said Shnas HaSheva. The Malach to say to you, Yeshmita Acheres Shei Kazo. Well, there's another type of Shemitah, and that is a loan. That when you lend somebody money, there's a certain amount of time that you have to rest, that you can't collect it. Ve'ezozo hamalve es chaver stam, and we're talking about somebody who lends his friend money without it specifying a payback date. That he cannot collect it for at least 30 days. He has got to let it rest for 30 days. That we say that 30 years in a year, 30 days in a year could already be considered like a year, and therefore when we say Shnas Ashmita, that's talking about this 30-day period when you cannot collect the loan yet. So the reason why we're quoting that, why this is coming up now, even though it has nothing to do with what we're talking about, is because it's a statement of Rav Yehuda Marav, and then Rav Kahana is going to ask a question on it, just like at the beginning of the Amud. We said Rav Yehuda Marav said, that was Rav Yehuda Shmuel. This is not Rav Yehuda Marav. Okay, but then Rav Kahana then asked a kasha on it, and here also we have Rav Kahana asking a kasha, I guess, in Rav Yehuda's statement. Okay, so if you have like a shirt, and in the shirt the neck hasn't been opened yet in like the fabric, I guess, you can't open that fabric for the neck on Shabbos. Somebody who opens up a place for the neck to go through a garment on Shabbos, you chayav a korban chatas. Rav Kahana asks the question, but you can open up a barrel on Shabbos. Why can I open up a barrel on Shabbos, but I can't open up a place for the neck and the shirt? So, I guess Rav Yehuda Marav responds, the difference is that the shirt was completely closed and you created a new opening. The barrel was just a lid on the barrel. It was technically already separated and they just kind of sealed it so that you would be able to open on Shabbos. That was Daf Gimel of Masechta Makos. We actually talked about it a lot in this Daf. We started talking about the opinion of Rabbi Akiva that if Eidim Zomim go to another Bezdin and admit that they're Eidim Zomim, they would not have to pay because it's a Knas. And the Knas is not Mishalim al Piatzmo. We learned about the scenario where Eidim Zomim testified that somebody got divorced and has to pay the Ksuba. There's the tricky aspect of, well, you might have to end up paying his Ksuba anyways. So they was kind of trying to figure out what the value of this kind of suffix Ksuba is. We talked about a scenario when there's an extension of, right, when they were testifying that a loan was payable, had to be paid back in a shorter amount of time, so we have to now evaluate the value of the extension of the loan, and that's what they would have to pay. Then we got into like Shemitah and Shemitah's Ksofim, and Shtikol Pruzbul and things like that, and we got also into the concept of Masna Mashul Kosu Batar to know Kayim or Batal. Rav says Kayim, Shmuel says Batal. Interesting stuff. Peace out.